Are we live?
I believe so.
Good morning. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the Domestic Violence Struggles in the Military Zoom panel event. We are very fortunate today to have with us a cadre of women who have been involved in this fight against domestic violence for many years. And they have been advocates for the victims, their families, offering them help and protection. And so we have asked them to join us today to share information that they have that can help us to help others and to address the problem. First, I would like to recognize the event organizers. Galia Paliga is the North Carolina NOW president. Can we do this double spotlight now? And there we go. This is Galia Paliga, North Carolina NOW president. Myself, Pam Carver from the Fayetteville NOW as president. We have Carol Ollinger. She is the NOW vice president. Cynthia Mixon we have on, but she doesn't have a camera. So we did want to say her name. Nicole Willingham, who helped to organize, but was unable to attend today from Fayetteville. Cynthia Mixon, I'm sorry, I messed up on her because she is from Fayetteville NOW. She's the chairperson of the Cumberland County Care Center Advisory Board. We have Margie Maddox from Raleigh NOW, who is the acting administrative officer. And we have Roberta Waddle, who has held multiple offices, but she is currently the treasurer of Fayetteville NOW and North Carolina NOW. So I want to thank all these women for all the hard work that they have put into preparing for this program. And now for our panelists. Roberta Roberta Waddle from Fayetteville NOW is going to be on the panel. We also have Amy White, who is the program director for the Care Center Family Violence Program with the Cumberland County Department of Social Services. We have Teresa Curry, who is the victim advocate for the Fayetteville Police Department. And I'm hoping I say this correct. Angelina Wilson. There she is. She is a victim advocate coordinator for the Army Community Services on Fort Bragg. We have Jamie Gesslein, who is the victim advocate at the Hope Mills Police Department. She is new to our area. And we have Cynthia Hale, who is the founder and CEO of FFT Helping Others. And she is located in Virginia and has done a lot of work around Washington and with Congress people. So I would like to welcome our panelists, and we look forward to the upcoming discussions and any information that you can give us to help others. At this time, I will turn it over to Carol Olinger. You're muted.
Today. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yep.
Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for being with us today. I don't know why I'm nervous, so bear with me. Jitterbugs today. I shouldn't be though. I'm so glad that we have these wonderful panelists, and I'm so happy that everyone is here to have this important panel discussion. So today, we're going to be talking about domestic violence and learning different ways to cope with the situation, hear powerful stories from women in our community. It's important that we touch bases and know that this can happen to people that we love, people that we know. And hearing and sharing these stories is so important. We shouldn't keep it inside, and we shouldn't feel like there's not a place for us to turn or a place for us to go. So I will start with some of our panelists, and I would like to introduce Roberta Waddell. Roberta, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. I appreciate everybody attending this program. I'm going to feel like the historian because I am not currently involved directly with domestic violence victims, or at least I hope I'm not. But from our past in Fayetteville Now, we have had several instances, only a couple of which I'll talk about today. One is in 1974, Burl Mitchell is a 35-year-old mother of 2 children. One is in elementary school and one is a preschooler. She is from Australia. She doesn't have family in the area. Burl is the wife of an Army Green Beret officer. On December 1 of 1974, she is murdered. Her nude body is dumped on Fort Bragg. It is found, and she is buried in an unmarked grave in Fayetteville. Her 36th birthday would have been December 25th of 1974. Eventually, her husband is charged and convicted of her murder and served a prison term. The children are raised by her husband's mother. There is no prior evidence of domestic violence is known. She had no family in the U.S. to turn to, and we know that isolation can be a problem when there is domestic violence. I'm supposed to tell you the rest of the story later in this program. So turn it back to Carol and whoever is next.
Thank you. So next we're going to have Galia. She's going to move us through our program.
No, we're gonna have other people tell their stories, the victim stories. So I know Cynthia Hale wants to tell her story, and we're gonna have other advocates tell stories that they're familiar with.
Each of the panelists can share, like Amy works with the care center here. She can tell us a story about that. Teresa with the Fayetteville Police Department. Angelina will tell us a story about one of the victims on Bragg. So
Okay. All right then. So next we have wonderful Amy Wright. Are you ready?
Oh.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, you are up next.
Okay. Prior to me becoming the program director over the care center, I used to be one of the counselors here. And I recall one of my cases that was very traumatizing to hear her story. She was kidnapped by her boyfriend and held hostage for 5 days straight. She was tortured held at gunpoint. He cut off her knuckles, so she has deformities in her hands.
What?
Her children were in the other bedroom, and she wasn't able to care for the kids because he would have her tied up while he would go and tend to the children. And then finally, I guess he became tired and he decided to take all the items that he used to torture her, ropes and gags, the gun, and try to put them on the grill and burn them. She was able to escape. Her family members had kept calling, trying to see where she was because they hadn't heard from her for several days. They were able to go to the residence and get her out of the home, and he was arrested. So that was very traumatizing to hear her go through the process. She was very tearful. It was triggering for her to even think back to that time that she had to experience that abuse from her abuser. So.
Wow. Carol's muted.
I'm getting it together. Thank you so much for sharing that. These heart-wrenching stories. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Next, we're going to have Teresa. She comes with a wealth of information and experience. I am like sitting on pins and needles to hear what she's going to share with us because she's worked firsthand with victims and had the chance to go through the motions and see things that we don't have the opportunity to see. So next, Teresa, you are up.
Good morning, everyone. Like she said, I'm Teresa Curry. I'm the victim advocate with Fayetteville PD. I guess one of the more recent stories I can share is of a lady named Stephanie Williams. If anyone has come to our domestic violence Remember My Name ceremony we have in October at our courthouse steps, she is a victim of domestic violence in which at the time she was pregnant, and the boyfriend was holding her hostage in her apartment as well. Somehow neighbors must have heard, called the police. They responded, and he was in the bedroom with her. He was underneath her body, laying down, using her body as a shield against police officers shooting him. He was currently stabbing her in the stomach, I guess to try to kill the baby. I'm not sure, probably. And one of the sergeants showed up on scene and was able to get a shot at him when he peeked from behind her head to see where they were. And he shot and killed the suspect, saving Stephanie and the baby. Stephanie spoke at our event. Like I said, she brought Bella, the little baby, beautiful little girl. She's also named the sergeant that saved their lives as Bella's godfather. And they have a really tight, close bond from that incident happening. So she's done public speaking on it, which is great therapy for her because she can tell her story to stop someone else from having to go through something similar. She's a great person. She did have some injuries because, you know, she was protecting her baby with her hands. So she was stabbed in the hands. She's had some surgeries to repair some of that, but she's doing great. You know, very careful about who she dates now, if she dates at all. But it's just one of those survivor stories that she has gone from victim to victor. And I'm so proud of her and the way she's raising Bella, beautiful little girl. And, you know, it's only by the grace of God that they were saved.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And
You're welcome.
I'm so glad in this instance that she had a positive outcome,
Yes,
because we all know that that doesn't always happen.
right.
Whew. Okay. So next we have Miss Jamie. Miss Jamie, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, so I'm just going to say Miss Jamie. And she is someone else. Do you see how young she looks? She is so experienced, and she has helped victims on a wide range, from sexual assault to domestic violence. She's worked in the police department, and just look at that face. I mean, I would think that with this much pressure and job titles like that, she might look different, but she doesn't. So she's taken it well, and I'm very excited to hear what she's going to say and the story that she's going to share with us. Go ahead, Miss Jamie, and you can tell us how to pronounce your last name correctly.
Yes, well, thank you for that introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Jamie Gessline. I just recently started here with the Hope Mills Police Department. So I don't have a lot of historical stories around the local area, but I did want to share that we, several of the panelists, I know we recently worked together on a case of a domestic violence victim who was unable to leave previously the abusive relationship for various reasons. But one of those was that the abuser was at home full time because of the pandemic. The abuser was able to stay at home, work from home, and that didn't leave the victim very many opportunities to be able to leave this situation safely. Every time law enforcement was called out, there wasn't much help that was provided for her, just, law enforcement's perspective of it. The situation seemed okay in their eyes, and so it just continued on for her. But due to a lot of advocacy from various people, we were able to get her some help, and it was a huge team effort. And I think that was an incredible thing for me to see, just how much this community works together and how great the teamwork is in this community. And I am very happy to see that, and I'm excited about that moving forward in the future. So that's just one little story I wanted to share that I've seen here.
I'm coming, I'm back. Oh, technology, you love to hate it. Okay, so next, and Miss Jamie, thank you so much. And welcome to Fayetteville, or Hope Mills. Next, we're gonna have Miss Angelina. She is another person that has a wealth of, no? You say no? Did I say her name wrong? Miss Wilson? I said it right, yes. I think. This is next. She is next. She has a wealth of information, and she is another beautiful person that has so much knowledge and so much information, and she's a victim's advocate. She helps in our community. And Miss Angelina, you are up next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angelina Villafane Wilson, and I am the Victim Advocate Coordinator Supervisor here on Fort Bragg with Army Community Services, but more specifically with the Family Advocacy Program. So I'm going to kind of switch it up and not specifically talk about one case, but I do want to just talk about some of the things that we tend to see in a lot of our cases, which are very concerning. Obviously, even if it's the military community, we see all forms of abuse. And so that could be the physical and the emotional. And so some examples that we've seen with the physical is the pushing and the hitting, but more recently, we tend to see a lot more strangulation cases. And I believe it's because typically, whenever there's an altercation happening, majority of us tend to have our hands or objects available. And when they are trying to stop the other person, many times they tend to go towards the neck, throat area. Something else we tend to see is them trying to take the cell phone, so that way somebody can't call 911 or try to get help. And so with a lot of the physical, we've also seen from, again, the pushing, shoving to the extremes of stab wounds in the foot, the forearm. We've seen gunshot wounds. We've seen hot wax poured on people. So again, it's a variety of things, but I also wanted to talk about the emotional side that we tend to see. We typically have a lot of the isolation, and that's kind of unique to the military because, as some of you may know, a lot of the military families will PCS, which means that they'll relocate to a new duty station, typically maybe between 2 to 4 years, depending on what they're doing. And so with that comes, you know, you leave your home base, you go somewhere completely new where you may not know anybody. And with that, we tend to see people strategically don't live on the installation. They live further out from the installations. They put all the water in their name, the electricity in their name, so that way they can cut it off if they want to. They, you know, put the cameras up and they know exactly where they are, and they have all the accounts so they can cut those off or use them in whatever form, you know, they want, depending on what's going on. And so many times that's a struggle when you have somebody, and just think for yourselves right now, if we, you know, took all of you guys and just placed you in somewhere in Wisconsin, you've never been, you don't know anybody, you're not familiar with the area, what would you do? You know, and now you are being told that you can't eat specific food, or you can't go anywhere. You don't have the car, you don't have the cell phone, you don't know who to trust, who to go to. We have it where the neighbors, you know, it's a tight knit community, and they might be watching people, not understanding that there's abuse going on. So again, that can be terrifying, just moving and having to be in a new place, let alone when you layer it with different levels of abuse. And something else that's unique too is with this, let's say if we all work together every single day and I come and I'm telling you these stories, I can paint whatever picture I want to each and every one of you about my spouse or somebody in the home. And because we might deploy together, we have missions and all these other things, we trust each other. So you're going to typically believe what I say, maybe not all the time. And so when we have somebody that does come forward, sometimes it's, you know, they're fearful, nobody's going to believe them, but then you're going against this rapport, and this rapport that sometimes within our community is so tight knit, more than even family, because again, look at the nature of what some of them do for a living. So it can really create struggles. And so that's where our program comes to try to provide them any resources that we can to try to locate them back to maybe family or safety. We try to engage the command. We try to engage the treatment side. We try to tap into our local community for maybe food resources or housing resources, employment. We are fortunate that we can offer a lot here. And so again, what I like to say is we try to cater our services to that specific, unique individual and their situation. But that's just kind of a little bit about what we tend to see, and it's just hit and miss with the different cases.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so next we have Miss Cynthia. This is another person that has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. And she was, when I was reading over her information, she also has "My Body is My Body." And that's perfect for today's topic. My body is my body. And I don't want it to be abused or mistreated physically or emotionally. So Miss Cynthia, you are up next.
Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing today? I am like she said, I'm a CEO of FFT Helping Others. I'm a Global Goodwill Ambassador. I'm a World Peace Ambassador on top of that. But on top of that, I was a victim of military domestic violence. I was 23 years ago, I was domestically abused by my husband in the military. We were stationed first in Quantico, and then after that, we were stationed in Cherry Point, North Carolina. Everything was great. We were stationed inside Cherry Point, and then my husband, when I got pregnant, decided we wanted to move outside of the base. And when I got pregnant, everything kind of went haywire. And then that's when the domestic violence started really badly. And he would actually keep me from eating. His abuse was so intense that he actually would, yes, strangle me, choke me. He would push me, hit me. He would take the like air out of the tires. He would take spark plugs out of the car. He would keep me off base so I couldn't actually go to the PX or the commissary. And I couldn't even go to his commanding officers. I couldn't go even to anybody to actually tell them, hey, this is what's going on. And when my mother even came to come visit, he would be so close to me that I couldn't even tell my mom what's going on. And it was such an abuse that I was fearful for my child because I was afraid. I had to cover myself um, in a hunch just so that I could keep my baby because I was afraid of the abuse was so intense. There were times when I just wanted to physically do harm to myself because I was afraid I was not only afraid for him, but I was afraid that I was going to do physical harm to myself. And it wasn't until he actually hit an officer, he actually hit somebody, and he actually went to the brig that actually was an open opportunity for me to go and get help and leave the opportunity. And we see that with a lot of women, who go through that same situation. They can't go to gain help because that's their open opportunity. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. And it's just like the panelist before me. She made it quite clear. A lot of women go through that same situation. It's not just women, a lot of men do too. They leave off the base or something like that, and they go through a lot of that abuse. And so we try to help a lot of families who are going through that same situation. That's what we're doing. We're trying to explain about what's going on with the Lautenberg Amendment, how that's really not helping, and how we can help with, helping with the Victims Against Women's Act, the Violence Against Women's Act, and also with the Lautenberg Amendment and how we can mix the two, So thank you for having me here.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your story. That is important for other people to be able to see that there's a way out. And thank God that you are here to share your story, and someone will hear that and know that there is help out there. You are such a blessing to all of us. And once again, thank you for sharing that personal story. Okay, next, we are going to hand it over to Roberta. Is that right? Roberta, you're up next. Yes.
Yes, I've got it. Well, first I'm going to finish the Burl Mitchell story. Murdered in 1974 by her active duty husband. Until 2007, her grave had no marker. Then her daughter, Christine Horn, came back to Fayetteville to dedicate a headstone to her mother. And on that headstone, in addition to Burl's name and her birth date, says, "Domestic violence kills." When Christine came back, she held a well-publicized memorial for her mother, and women, this is 2007 from 1974, some of Burl's original neighbors heard about the memorial service and came and talked to Christine, which was really great for them to be able to get back together. And at that time, some of the members of Fayetteville NOW pledged that we would put a wreath on Burl's grave every year we do it every year. We do it in December generally. And we have done so every year from then till now. The idea being that we do publicize it and hope that other people become more aware of domestic violence. And so that's the Burrell Mitchell story. We're still somewhat in touch with Christine. She's come back one other time, but mostly it's just us going out to the gravesite, which is across the Lafayette Cemetery, across from the VA hospital on Ramsey Street. I don't think, well, I don't consider that a happy ending exactly, but Christine and her brother did survive and have managed to lead more or less normal lives, I guess. The other story that I was asked to mention is much more closely personal to me and my husband. Danelle Hernandez and her husband had served in the military and they had gotten out. They had bought a house. He had a job, and Danelle went to Fayetteville State to get a college degree. She graduated and eventually got employment there in the science department. While she was there, she was a student of my husband and they became quite close. She also did student study, work study under him. After several years of abuse and one evening being strangled until she passed out, she realized she had to leave. Her husband, my husband, helped her move out
Yes.
one night while Alex was at work. She left with her daughter, 2 dogs, and 9 guns and hid out with her friends, with a friend. The next year was sort of a jumble. She went to court several times for domestic abuse, for domestic violence. She went for child custody and all of that. But you know, in North Carolina, even if you file for divorce, you have to be separated a year before you can become official. During that year, where she actually hadn't filed for the divorce, but she would have liked to, she and the dogs and the child spent some time with us. In fact, in Christmas of 1994, we weren't sure if our daughters would be safe to come home for the Christmas holiday because we knew that he was out there somewhere looking for her or possibly plotting something. Alex did spend some time in the county jail, but it didn't do much good. There was a judge who's currently still on the bench who said he was dangerous and said he should have no weapons, knives, guns, or any other kind of weapons. And we all knew that she was in extreme danger of being killed. Anyway, Alex went back to his native Puerto Rico and stayed there for a while. And it was about a year, almost a year later, when he came back, supposedly for a child custody hearing. But he really was plotting murder. He stopped Danelle and met her on the Fayetteville State campus, from which he had been barred, and killed her. Danelle had just left my husband's office on Fayetteville State when she was shot by her husband outside the science building on December 10, 1995. Alex shot himself and he died. She was 29 and had a 6-year-old daughter. The daughter had been sent to live with Danelle's mother in Oregon so that she wasn't actually here. I'm going to read a section of a WFNC editorial that my husband did sometime after Danelle's death. I don't know the exact date. Danelle Hernandez did not deserve the 8 years of abuse she took from her husband. She did not deserve to be treated as property to be beaten whenever he felt like it. When she finally understood this and that things would never get better for her, she left him. Danelle dreamed that once free, she could start a new life for herself and her child. And she was so full of life. She wanted to be a forester. She wanted to be a marine biologist. She wanted to be a biomedical researcher. But to do any of that, she had to get divorced without getting killed. After a year's separation, Danelle's finances were such that she did not even have the few $100s necessary to pay for a divorce. And after a year's separation, her husband killed her. Danelle is dead. Perhaps she would have been killed regardless of North Carolina law, but the laws did not help. The laws and judicial system in North Carolina inadequately protect women and contribute to their abuse and their deaths. The state should not be accomplice to murder. That is precisely what it is when it fails to provide adequate legal protections for the abused wife and makes it so difficult for her to escape the monster that her husband has become. I don't know what could have helped, but certainly having a much shorter delay between divorce, separation and divorce could not have hurt. And I think the state legislature is considering a bill along that line, but I don't know if it's going anywhere. But asking people to wait a year for divorce after marriage is over is more torture than help. Danelle's child, we kept up with her for some time. It's kind of hard. She's in Oregon and she's a school-age child, but we kept up with her for several years, and then we sort of lost track of her. But a couple of years ago, she decided she would revisit Fayetteville and her mother's memories and contacted us, and we have been in touch. She is now 30 years old. She is apparently happily married, and she's the successful young woman, and I am delighted that that part has turned out as well as it has. But Danelle's death made irrevocable changes in not just her daughter's life, but also people around Danelle. So it wasn't just Danelle and her family. I mean, my husband and I have been affected, and other friends as well. But I'll pass.
Okay, I think she passed it back to me. Hi, I'm back. Oh,
Yes,
thank you for talking about the court system. Thank you for mentioning legislation, because with all that we heard, we can always find a little piece of what's going to happen next. Is the court going to help us? Is there going to be an action that actually helps us? Between crossover bills and everything that actually gets sent up, is it going to help us when we call the police, whether it's the military police or our local police? Thank you for mentioning that. Next, we're going to hand it off to Galia. She is our president of the state now, but she does so many other things, to include helping put this together. She did lots of homework. She was calling and texting and emailing the different panelists, and she put together a powerful group of women. So Galia, you are up next.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that, Carol. Yes, we're working with a great little group here, and we're all putting the panelists together, and we're very happy about having these panelists here. Many of you are in a difficult line of work, and people really depend on you, and others have had domestic violence experiences, and we know Cynthia Hale, and also like Erin Scanlon, who's worked with us on others of these programs before. And you know, the domestic violence experience, and also not getting enough help, or barely getting enough help, like changed the trajectory of your lives, and you became advocates, and we appreciate that. And I also want to mention how interested and involved Fayetteville Now is, specifically in the Rape Crisis Center, on boards helping survivors, and how they're on call for rape kits, to go through with the victims through this terrible process. And as you may know, right now, the Fayetteville Hospital doesn't have the SANE nurses, doesn't have the rape kit nurses, the dedicated nurses to do this. And so that's another problem that I know Pam Carter and Fayetteville Now have been trying to address. So a lot of the stories have extreme violence, isolation of spouses, extreme danger, murder. They're heavy stuff. And there are some specific things that we want to talk more about, including the Lautenberg Amendment that Cynthia mentioned. And I'd actually like for Cynthia to tell us more about the Lautenberg Amendment first, and how it could be and should be used, and what's going on with that. So Cynthia.
So, and I hope everybody can hear me. So to make it clear, so the Lautenberg Amendment was, and I'm sure everybody knows, it was established in 1968 as a gun control. Subsequently, the Lautenberg Amendment was an amendment that prohibited anyone as a conviction of a felony, and anyone subsequent to that as a domestic violence protection order, from possessing a firearm. The bill was passed almost unanimous as a support, and represents a Congress recognition that anyone who attempts or threatens violence against a loved one and has demonstrated that he or she possesses an unacceptable risk should be prohibited from possessing a firearm. But first of all, there's three issues with that. Well, there's three subsequent parts of that. First of all, it will assist in preventing those individuals who have demonstrated the propensities from domestic violence from obtaining a firearm. Second, it will assist law enforcement from prohibiting a tool from removing the firearm. And finally, it will serve as a federal prosecution tool. But the problem is, it's been there since I think fall of 1996 was when it was re-amended. But that's 1996. We're now in 2021. And the Violence Against Women's Act, it's been reenacted like 3 times. And there's no involvement between the two. And the problem is, it's when there's an issue of someone utilizing a firearm as an assault, it should be used as a federal crime. And when there's a problem with prohibiting that federal, or when there's utilizing a domestic violence issue with a crime, all they're utilizing it as is, and I'm actually using the verbiage that they have here, is in prohibiting anyone of a convicted of felony, anyone subjected to domestic violence protected order, possessing a firearm. It says here, underline, misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. But anywhere else, it says assault with a deadly weapon is usually a felony punishable by 1 to 20 years in a prison, depending on specific provisions. Anywhere else, it would be a felony punishable by a crime with 20 years. Under the Lautenberg Amendment, it is not. And so we need to mix the two. We need to be able to have the Lautenberg Amendment and the Violence Against Women's Act to be at least able to have that. And not only that, we should be able to have something in which we assist the police officers so that we can gain that footing for them. And there is no gun control act here, at least with the Violence Against Women's Act. it is a federal crime under the Gun Control Act to possess. Again, I'm reading the Violence Against Women's Act, where it says it is a federal crime under the Gun Control Act to possess firearms and or ammunition while subject to qualifying protection order, to possess firearms or ammunition after conviction or qualifying misdemeanor crime under domestic violence. A violent act of gun control as a maximum prison term of 10 years. There's nothing under the Lautenberg Amendment that gives you a verbiage or any of that that tells them there is going to be a 10 or more crime. So the Lautenberg Amendment does not define how long they will have prison term. It doesn't tell you that there are going to be a violation. It doesn't tell you that. It just says it will be a misdemeanor. So we need to define with a good verbiage how long it will be. So there is nothing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there also something in the Lautenberg Amendment for housing for a spouse if there's domestic violence?
There's nothing. There's absolutely no housing. There's absolutely no assistance. That's the other thing I wanted to get into. There's actually no housing. There's no help. When I was going through domestic violence and I needed to leave, and there's also some other specific assistance for women who are in need, which again, I'm going back to the Violence Against Women's Act. In case of restitution to pay for victims, there's losses. There's losses for cost. There's losses for medical. There's losses for psychological care. There's losses for therapy, transportation, all of that. And so being able to get assistance is a huge, footing for people who are dealing with those kind of issues. And we get none. There's nothing in there. And so we need to change the verbiage. We need to bring it back to the floor and be able to say, what is the assistance or civil protection that families of those who are getting abused, especially children who are being molested, families who are being, sexually assaulted, what is the psychological need? What is the cognitive need? What is the transportation need? There's no women. I mean, they have to walk sometimes to go all the way to get housing somewhere. There's been women who've come to me and said, I can't get anywhere. How am I going to get to a hotel? And they call sometimes that these bases are far. So we have to be able to give them that care. And losses, any other losses that they lost in their homes. So we have to be able to help them with something.
Right. Is it used much? Is the Lautenberg Amendment used much in the military?
It is used when there's certain violations. And the problem is there is a portion of that which I wanted to address, in which they still can hold their firearm while they are in. This is the person is allowed to continue to do or possess any firearm or ammunition while they are still in duty. And that's kind of a big issue for us, because if that person has been abused
is violent
and violent, that causes an issue, specifically going back to a Vanessa Guillen issue. We have to consider those issues. We have to consider the fact that, we've seen deaths in many of our other bases.
May I?
Yes.
Robert, I think maybe Angelina can speak to this, but it really does put the Army or the military in kind of a catch-22 situation when there are people who rely on firearms to do their jobs can't possess firearms, supposedly. So they let them use the firearms when they're on duty, but then who knows where else those firearms go. So I would be interested in hearing Angelina. I think she's the Fort Bragg person, if she would address that a little bit.
Yes, I think it's, I think for us and even probably Miss Curry would, it would be really relevant for her as well. But it's unique because some of the military need them, you know, for a variety of reasons, especially on deployments. The hard thing is that, and not just in the military community, but a lot of people have weapons in their homes. And so one thing that is hard is whether you live on the installation or off the installation, and the jurisdiction and things of that nature come into play. And with a command, you know, if you live on the installation, then they have jurisdiction where they can say, okay, we're going to go ahead and take those weapons and secure them. But if you live off the installation, then me as a commander, I can request that you turn them in or something
Yes.
along those lines, but I can't necessarily say you have to give me those weapons. And so that's where, you know, potentially filing for protection order or something of that
Yes.
nature can give the jurisdiction necessary, unless whoever we're working with somehow has access to the weapons. Then many times what we're saying is, do you feel comfortable where you can give them to the command, or you can do X, Y, or Z with them, have them locked and secured, or move them, or, you know, maybe take a portion of it or something like that. But it is
But
very
we have to anticipate a verbiage within the Lautenberg, or some anticipation of what needs to be said within that, because there's nothing there now. I mean, there has to be something in which the command says, okay, you have already had 2 issues in which you have committed an assault against your family member. And so now that you've committed an assault against your family member, it's up to the command to now say, no, you cannot have a firearm within your family or within your home. And now you're restricted to have that firearm only per se, you know, from 1700 hours to, you know, whatever 100 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's up to the command. But since there is nothing of that, you know, within said, you know, restrictions, they can just hold it any time. That's the problem that we have.
And that's, well, and that's the hard thing too with the commands is, you know, depending on who you're talking to, how much power do you give or not want to give to one entity? And the hard thing is that many times we have commands that are willing and wanting to do, but their hands are tied. And so we always tell them, okay, you have to go back and talk to JAG and see what options you do or don't have.
Right.
And really, honestly, it's us as advocates thinking outside the box on how can we mitigate this? How can we get around this?
Right.
You know, can we have a soldier who is, you know, restricted to post? Can we do things that can limit them going? But then, you know, do you have somebody watching them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Right.
How long does that go for? Is that even reasonable? And it's really hard. And that's why it truly is a case by case, but it's a very unique population, again, with law enforcement, with people who, security, military, and stuff like that. But I think somebody has their hand up, so.
And then Teresa, did you want to weigh in on this?
I can. I mean, we've in the past, we've had some issues with, you know, maybe a sheriff deputy or Fayetteville PD officer having some domestic issues. And, you know, we do take the spouse up there, do the protection order, but our internal affairs will put him on admin, take the guns away, you know, try to get him some help, see what maybe she's wanting to do. So we try to keep them as, you know, safe as we can. I did put in the chat too about, we were talking earlier about the 1 year for divorce. There's a Senate bill going around, Bill 445, I believe, to try to waive that for domestic violence victims. So that's in the Senate right now. And they just passed 2 other House bills. One was for hospitals not to charge rape victims on the sexual assault Saki kit for the rape collection. And the other one was, what was it? I forgot what it was now. I typed it and forgot it.
Yeah, it's in the chat. People can check the chat.
Yeah, but they are, doing things up in the house and all. We just have to keep pushing our legislatures to get these things introduced.
It was
when we
the
come,
Yeah.
it was your DNA samples.
yeah, the DNA samples. And see, we've already had that on felony arrests before, but now we can do it on misdemeanor arrests. So, and collect that. We solve a lot of crimes with that DNA, so it's very important to get that. So we've gone back and solved a lot of the older cold case rapes with DNA, a hit from 20 years ago, and we submit it and get a hit on it, and we're able to arrest that person.
Yeah, and wouldn't it have been nice
And
if
that-
they did it 20 years ago and got them off the streets 20 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the Senate Bill 445 for North Carolina.
Yes, on the waiving the year for the divorce is what
I
that
see it. Yeah, I'm looking at
Also,
it right now.
um,
Thank you.
It's
Mhm.
probably a good, sorry, probably a good time to mention, like, North Carolina Now does weekly legislative updates following bills that are relevant to women's issues. And so we track a lot of these bills, and those are all posted on the NC Now website. So you can look that stuff up. And so we'll say, like, where it is in the process of the legislature and if it may cross over, which it sounds like these bills did, so that would be great. Anyway, does anyone else want to weigh in on Lautenberg Amendment? Amy?
I had a couple of things I wanted to say.
Okay. You have your hand up.
Yeah. Because in researching and catching up on this, the finer details, the 1996 revisions actually made the Lautenberg Amendment more confusing
Yes.
to the judicial system, because it does not, as Cynthia say, specifically detail the definition, the punishment, but also I saw a lot of information from attorneys that are appealing to people who may be charged with or may be in danger of losing their right to own guns because of the Lautenberg, where they're advertising, you have to be convicted. They can't take your rights away and all this kind of stuff. So they get, like, when there's active cases, the domestic violence abuser will plead down the charges. So therefore, they're still able to access weapons. And the question I had is how, because the Lautenberg Amendment is not just for military. The Lautenberg Amendment is for all domestic violence, and it does not exclude the police, and it does not exclude the military. So everyone is under that. So I think it actually should be strengthened. But how do I'm like, how do they enforce it? How do you know that a person, if they have been
But that's what I mean, is that assault with a deadly weapon is usually a felony punishable by 1 to 20 years.
Right.
In prison. Deadly, depending on a specific provision. And that's what if you look it up, regardless. And if you're sitting there trying to push down assault with a deadly weapon to a misdemeanor because of the Lautenberg, and you're sitting there going, if you are an attorney and you keep saying, well, we can lower that down for you. We can lower it down to misdemeanor to no crime and get it down for you without punishable crime, and you'll get out of it, no worries. Then you're really not doing your due diligence, because now you can just consider yourself getting out of it, that's my problem, because and then you can go back and get into another relationship, and then you can go and do the assault with a deadly weapon and hurt another person, another victim, another child, my biggest thing is children, sorry, another child or another woman who does have children, or you can hurt another woman. And again, it's not punishable for you. You can continue to do this, but the definition of assault with a deadly weapon is a felony. It's punishable 1 to 20 years. And so there has to be a good definition for the Lautenberg Amendment, a good definition, because if it's defined for anything, whether it's the Violence Against Women's Act, there's no good definition in the Lautenberg Amendment. There has to be a good definition.
Okay, so it needs
I
to be
wanted to
improved.
see, yeah, I wanted to see, ask Angelina, I know the military has had a big focus on the sexual assault, and we have been focused on that, and I know others have, and we've seen progress moving in the current legislation where they're now talking about taking the reporting of sexual assault outside the chain of command. Are there any things being that you can tell us about, like, and this goes for Teresa and Jamie and everybody, because it doesn't happen just in the military, it happens everywhere, but there's little differences, but are there any things being put in place to address the domestic violence problem that's on base? Or like Teresa, if I called you and said, I think Judy is a victim of domestic abuse, how would you be able to help her? Is there steps that you take then? Or is there any type of way, like on the military, that I know they have the military wives gather together, that if so and such wife doesn't show up, that somebody checks on her? I mean, is there an outreach type of things? Whoever wants to go first. Teresa, tell me what you would do if I called you.
Okay. So I've had calls like that where maybe mother has called from another area, either another state or whatever, and saying my daughter's being abused. What the first thing we can do, we can try to make contact with her if there is a way. There's sometimes is that hurdle that maybe she has no phone, he's taking it, there's no way to contact her. So we know if he's maybe at work from the mother telling us that, maybe the girl went next door and used a phone or computer, and we know he's not home, we can always send officers, depending on location. If it's ours, Hope Mills, Cumberland County, we can send officers to do a well-being check. You can always call 911 and ask for a well-being check on any address, and they'll get you to the right jurisdiction. If you've got the wrong one, maybe you're calling Fayetteville 911, but it's really county, they'll send you over to county 911. You can give the address and say, you know, I think my daughter's being abused. The neighbor called me, they're good friends, and she said, you know, something's going on, need to get somebody here. But maybe doesn't want to give her name and get involved with law enforcement, but she heard something, a scream or something, and called the mother-in-law. But we can go out and check with the residents. They'll actually talk to the girl, the woman, and him if he's there. They'll get them separated and try to find out what's going on in the house. You know, we've got a complaint, and we want to make sure everyone's okay in the house. If she's comfortable and willing to talk, especially if officers are there, sometimes we can help get her out of that situation. We've recently had that kind of call. Mom was in Raleigh, daughter was in, we thought it was Hope Mills, and Jamie had talked to her as well, and then they got disconnected. So somehow she got me, And then when I figured out where the address was, it was actually Cumberland County, but we were all three. That's what Jamie was talking about in the beginning. We were all three working with this mama, trying to get her daughter out of the house, which he would let her leave. He was military too, by the way. I think I let Angelina know. He wouldn't let her leave with one of the children. He let her take the younger one because it was an infant and he had to change diapers, but I think he wanted to keep the older one because he didn't have to change any diapers on the toddler. He was potty trained. So and of course mom is not going to leave without that baby. You know, she's not going to leave the baby there. So she told the deputies that she's not leaving her child there. She's going to stay here in this dangerous environment for her because she's not leaving her kid. And so after getting contacted with Debbie Cashwell, the county advocate, we had her send deputies back out there, talk to the girl again, and get that child out of that house with the mama safely. And she was able to get out and get to her mother's house in Raleigh. But it took going over there a second time because the first time it wasn't handled correctly. And then the second time after the advocates all get together, we fixed it. So that's how that went.
Well, see,
Wow.
I think that to me sounds like it's, I know one of the big things now is the terminology defund the police.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we really need to defund the police. I think we need to redirect the funds because
Right.
if we can have people like you and advocates and social workers that respond to some of these calls, you don't need an armed policeman there.
Right.
Always.
Well,
He might be sitting out in the car.
right. Well, like Jamie and I go out to scenes with officers. We cannot go alone. We are not sworn. We do not carry a gun. And if there's a violent situation, we cannot go without them. But we do go with them. So.
I'm going to ask one more thing, and then I'll let some other people talk. I wanted to ask Amy White, because she is at the shelter here, where do you take in military families, or is there any qualifications that, or for people to seek help from you? How did they say, I decide I want to leave the house? Did they just call you and tell you, or did they have to have protective orders or whatever?
No, all they have to do is call our line, which is 24/7. And they would just have to, we put them in contact with one of our counselors. The counselors will do an assessment on them. And then we will find out, if they're currently safe. If they're not safe, then we strongly encourage them to contact law enforcement because we want to get them out of that environment as soon as possible. Law enforcement can often transport them over to our shelter. And so our shelter's in an undisclosed location, so we can't have multiple people come there. But we accept everybody. We don't discriminate against anyone. Anyone can come into the shelter if they're a domestic violence victim.
Is it just for Cumberland County, or do y'all allow people?
We allow people all over if they meet criteria. As a matter of fact, if other shelters are full, we've often taken Robinson County, we've taken Hope County, we've taken Harnett County, Interact from Raleigh. It's just various, as we all work together to make sure that victims are safe.
Thank you. If there's anyone else that has a question that they would like answered, I think Kim Lowe has asked to speak. She is a policy advisor working on policy and a congressional candidate. So can we move Kim into speaking mode? I'm not
Vicky,
familiar.
Vicky will do
We've
it.
got a technician handling all this webinar stuff.
And thank you, Vicky.
Thank all you panelists. Y'all have given such good information. And I will say, while we're getting her up, when I was talking with Jamie, she said, well, maybe you can bring some stuff that you learned from Florida to North Carolina. And it really pleased me when she said, well, there's things that North Carolina does that I wish they did in Florida. So that made me feel like we're doing some things right here.
Yes, absolutely.
Kim, you may want to introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Kimberly Lowe. I'm located in Virginia. I'm running for Congress at the federal level in order to reform our family courts. I am a domestic violence survivor. I am on year 5 of family court with my abuser. And something that we haven't talked enough about, except one person did, is that in court, there's no accountability, there's no transparency. And most of the times domestic violence victims, which include men and women, get completely railroaded in a court. And what I haven't heard enough people talk about is the children as a result. In the majority of cases in civil court, the children are placed back with their abuser, and almost 900 children across the United States have been murdered at the hands of their abuser, and they have been court-ordered visitation with their abuser. So there's no due process. There's no one to hold them accountable. So I'm working on policy to be introduced at the state level in Virginia in 2022. That policy can be copied and replicated across the United States. So I'm working with other legislators across the United States to get that out. But really, the only way that we're going to solve this is with sweeping federal changes. That's why I'm running at the federal level. And I'm also working on a transitional domestic violence shelter, because we have a lot of human trafficking victims that are survivors of domestic violence. They are addicted to drugs by their abuser, so that way they can be controlled. And most of the times they cannot go into a regular shelter for help. So we are creating one in my district because I have one of Virginia's largest districts and we have no shelters. And we don't only need a short-term shelter, we need a place for people to go where they can get job training, they can get clean, get mental health help, substance abuse health, get their children in school and give them the help that they need. I also want to say that I'm a member of the address confidentiality program. We need to make sure that all states have this program. Not all states have this. So your abuser is constantly able to find you, stalk you. And as you know, many murders occur. So I just wanted to let you know that I also have, I advocate for families who are going through this. I have thousands upon thousands of people reaching out to me from across the United States. We try to get them the resources that they need. I have one case where a woman was severely abused by her husband in the military. Everything went through the military courts. She has not seen her children, 2 little girls who were being actively sexually assaulted by her husband. And there's no relief in the courts. And these 2 little girls are currently being sexually assaulted, and the mother has been completely cut out of their life. So there are horrors happening in the military courts, and the military courts have to be addressed at the federal level too. This has to be included in the policy and legislation. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. Again, my name is Kimberly Lowe, L-O-W-E. You can find me at www.kimberlylowe.com. And let's continue to fight in order to save people. Abuse happens for women, men, and for children. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Kim, I wanted to point out, and I don't know if who all is aware, in Cumberland County, we have a Worth Court that is designed to handle those cases that you're talking about, sexual trafficking, abuse, and all that. It's not regular court. It's handled entirely different. That is something you may want to look into as you're doing your stuff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. So we're in this pandemic, and we know that there's even more isolation during the pandemic because many people can't go to work. You don't have the relief of school, of going to school, of getting out of the environment. And I was wondering if the panelists wanted to talk about how things changed during the pandemic. And I wanted to start with Amy having a shelter. So Amy, would you like to start on that?
Sure. Before I do, I did want to mention that the Care Center does offer the address confidentiality program that Ms. Kimberly was speaking about. So victims are allowed to come here and we are able to help them fill out the forms and get it to Raleigh where they can be on that program. I'll make you aware of that. We do have that here in Cumberland County. As far as, now what was your question about if the numbers have increased?
Yeah, like during the past 15 months of the pandemic, has there been an increase or a decrease and like the intensity?
We've actually seen it fluctuate. When COVID first broke out, there was a massive increase in the number of calls. They kind of tapered off a little bit, but now since rules are starting to lessen about, quarantine and things of that nature, we've actually seen an uptick. In April, we have gotten several calls. Our shelter had been vacant for quite some time, believe it or not. But here lately, we have been at capacity for the past couple of months. So we've had to utilize other domestic violence shelters whenever they call, and we're not able to get them in our shelter. We have to locate another shelter outside of the county. And sometimes victims don't want to leave the county. So we have to refer them to what we call coordinated entry here, and they're able to get them in contact with the Salvation Army and get them there if they want to stay within this area. But we strongly encourage them to go to a domestic violence shelter because things are a little bit more of like a home environment versus being in a wide community population in a regular standard shelter. But we have seen an increase within the past couple of months in services being needed.
So did you notice, have you noticed like more violence or more intense violence or not really?
We have seen a lot more strangulation cases coming in and broken bones. We've had several come in with broken arms, broken legs. We've had one that had to have surgery because she was punched multiple times in her stomach. So it has seen, we have seen a lot more violent cases lately than normal.
Okay. Okay, and I was wondering, did anybody else, any of the other panelists want to weigh in on changes during the pandemic?
I wanted to, if I could go back to one prior question about what would we do if somebody was to notify us or call us and make a report?
Okay.
If I could, so I just wanted to say that we do have our family abuse hotline, and on that family abuse hotline, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we take all reports of abuse pertaining to child neglect, any kind of intimate partner or domestic violence. And also the most recent is problematic sexual behavior in children and youth, which is more of minors and it's child on child. And so we are the, we man the hotline. And so we would take all the reports. And so come to us, we would go over their reporting options, which is restricted and unrestricted, and then we would go over that we are mandated reporters. At that point, that's where we stop them and tell them, you don't have to tell us who you are if you want to ask any questions, if you want to keep it hypothetical, if you want to go over everything, whatever it is, we just want you to feel comfortable. And then at that point, we would listen to everything and try to guide them as best we could with the resources on the installation, off the installation, and what we can do. For instance, the e-filing, the reaching out to Teresa Curry and stuff like that. We do have an office down at the Cumberland County Courthouse with an advocate down there as well. So if anybody goes into SafeLink, then that's where we will also try to speak with them. If they're affiliated with the military, we will accompany them to any kind of CID meetings, law enforcement, legal, anything with court. The surrounding counties will go with them. Sometimes we can do safety moves where we will get them relocated. Other times we get them immediately out of here. It just depends on that case. If it's going to go to a court martial, we'll accompany them. We will keep them updated throughout that process. There's other programs like transitional compensation that might be able to assist if a service member is being separated from the military for a dependent abuse offense. So that is something that we would help them with as well. Also, once they come to us, we would give them different counseling options, and it actually goes through a whole FAP process for counseling and treatment. So we would detail that and basically be the advocate for them
And
throughout.
would you
So that's
would
that's
you
for
explain
military,
the
right?
transitional, the like if the military spouse is being kicked out of the Army, then the victim would get their salary? Is that what you're talking about?
So the transitional compensation program is a program that if the service member, male or female, is being separated for a dependent abuse offense, then once we gather everything, if it's approved, then the family, and so it would be the current spouse, potentially a former spouse if the abuse was ongoing whenever they were married and living with each other, and then also for any child that was in the home at the time of the abuse. And basically what it does is it would give them a monthly stipend for up to 36 months. It would also give them PX and commissary privileges for up to 36 months, and it would also give them TRICARE benefits for up to 36 months. So it just depends again on what's going on, and there's different routes that we would take depending on if they included the abuse or if they did not include the abuse. So it's its own process, and if it's approved, then basically it would be like they're their own sponsor, and then they would have an ID card and be able to utilize all those services. And the monthly stipend, it just depends on how many children are in the home and stuff like that, but it would be up to the 36 months, and it paid directly to them from DFAS on the first of every month.
Is that used much?
It is used a good bit, but again, it all depends on, is the service member being separated from the military? And that's kind of that kicker. If they are, then how are they being separated? What's included and what route we have to go? I don't know about other installations. I do know that I'm very familiar with it. We do it a lot here. It's not something that we necessarily go and tell everybody right at the beginning, because we never know from start to finish what's going to happen with the case. And what we don't want to do is give false hope. But if it is something that is an option, we will definitely detail everything for them at that time. But there's a lot that we can do. It just, again, we cater it and it's case by case. And really our whole hope is to get involved before it escalates, to try to give any kind of resources or help in whether they stay together or whether they separate. So that way they can at least co-parent or have a healthy relationship with them, or moving forward, they can have a healthy relationship with somebody else.
And so does the commander have to get involved for this to be, for them to be disciplined, for, you know, interference to happen to before you guys can get involved, or
I wouldn't
with you?
I think it just depends. So the commander is the one who oversees that soldier, depending on, you know, what case it is. But the commander is the one who can pursue the UCMJ against the service member, depending on what's ongoing. So, you know, a lot of the programs are commander-led programs. And so, again, it depends. If it's a restricted report, the command is not necessarily going to know what's ongoing. But if it's unrestricted, then yes, the command would be made aware.
Okay. Pam, did you have something for that?
Well, all I was going to say is I think we could go on for about 4 more hours. I think we need, because I was thinking we need to maybe plan another domestic violence. We need to do some actions there, because one thing that I would like to see happen, instead of us having, I think maybe if we start focusing more on the abuser, what we can do to prevent him from abusing, then maybe we won't have so many victims to help.
I do have one that I wanted, that's relevant to what we're doing. It now has been involved in the Violence Against Women Act, and I want to know, like, from the shelter and from the other panelists, if you guys are benefiting, if your shelters and stuff are getting money, and what kind of help you might be getting with the Violence Against Women Act, or how it all other ways it might affect you.
Okay, so we are a grant, we're part grant funded, part county funded. So our program is very unique. A lot of the other agencies are completely nonprofit, but we are not. But our program, we have 4 grants that we received. The Emergency Solution Grant, which covers the maintenance and care and other items at the shelter. We have the FIPSA grant, Family Violence Act, that we use to pay the shelter supervisor, our shelter. And then we have the Council for Women grant, which pays for, I think, 3 of our counselors and our shelter technicians. And then we get the Governor's Crime Commission grant, and they also assist in paying the salaries of our staff. So a lot of it is salary related, but we do have extra funding that we can assist with the victims to pay their rental deposits, the security deposit for their home, lights, things of that nature to help them restart in their new home. We also work very closely with coordinated entry. A lot of these victims are unemployed. So working with coordinated entry, they have a transitional housing program. We're able to, the majority of time, to get them in there. But we do strongly encourage our victims when they come into the shelter to better themselves and try to get employment. Because we are part of social services, we have extra benefits that we're able to utilize, like such as daycare, helping them get linked with daycare services, food stamps, Medicaid, TANF assistance, a program which is a little bit of extra money to help them. So being part county funded, it gives us a lot of benefits as well. We work very closely with the military. We often call each other if we have a military family that needs services. We work very closely with Hope Mills Police Department, Fayetteville Police Department, Sheriff's Office, and we all coordinate services together. I think we have a very good, close-knit community here in Cumberland County, which is very beneficial because we get more done to help these victims, and I think it's very important.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. We will take some questions. You can direct questions to specific panelists. Do your questions in the chat, and panelists, if you want, you can do questions. And we'll just do this for a few minutes because we are pretty much at our time, but and then Margie will close. So if there are any questions that might be quick.
There was one question that was in the chat to ask I guess the civilian panelists if there's anything that they can suggest to the military about handling domestic violence. But I think we've already established that they are a connected group. The military in this community, I'm not sure of all communities, but in Fayetteville, Cumberland County, Fort Bragg, they're all working together. But is there any, I'll put it out there to the military or the civilians. What things do y'all need to help improve your programs or to help combat domestic violence? If there's anybody that has any things that you think would make your program more efficient or effective.
I just want to say in reference to that, and I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, I think a key component is the prevention side. And I do want to kind of restate that we do have a great relationship here on the civilian side and on the military side. And I believe that that is crucial in helping our clientele. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I might add too, I mean, like Angelina, Jamie now, I think we need a Spring Lake coordinator person.
I'm working on that.
But okay, good, because we need one. But all of us also sat on the domestic violence task force, I guess board, I guess you call it. And we meet every few months and discuss issues that we know that we have run across with our victims, and trying to rectify situations. Like I had said, the deputies didn't help the one time on the standby with the victim trying to leave, but the second time they were sent out by the actual advocate with the county, things got done and she got to a safe place. So, you know, we know each other's numbers. We are in constant contact. I get daily emails from Fort Bragg wanting assistance on case information. Do you have a case with this family? And I give it to them because we have an MOU. We share our information. So we're always looking out, you know, to be in contact with each other and to help each other out with cases. So.
Okay, that's wonderful. All right. Margie, we are ready for you. Margie's going to close.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to say that as we bring this panel presentation to a close, I just want to say, wow. I don't think that I've ever learned so much, and about all the things that you all do, all the knowledge and the stories that you shared. They were just amazing that you shared all those things with us this morning. And I really do have a better understanding of what you ladies do, not only in the military aspect of it, but also in the surrounding community. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about things that are in the program, but there's lots of information in the program that you might want to go back and look at. We have things about the crisis numbers that you can call, not only from the crisis centers, but from the police department. We have an event this evening that is put on by the Raleigh MAD Awareness. And so they're going to do a presentation this evening, and they also have a survey in the program that you might want to complete to give them some additional data. There's also additional information about the Burrow Mitchell story and some beautiful pictures in there to give you a better understanding of that. And of course, you could also help out with the Rape Crisis Center. There's going to be some advocacy training in August, on August 3rd and on August 10th. And I just think that it's a wonderful opportunity to share all this different types of information that we have. And I do encourage you to look at the Lautenberg Amendment is written in there. There's a lot of information about the Violence Against Women's Act that's in there. And it's important, I think, that is, Cynthia said, that we somehow figure out how to put those two things together and really make them work to our benefit here. So again, I want to thank you. I don't want to belabor this because we're past our time already, but I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us. They were just outstanding. I just can't hardly say that enough. Wow is the right word. I also want to thank people who joined us to listen to the panel. And I want to say that, you know, it's been a wonderful morning, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So this kind of officially ends our program right now. So I'm going to just say goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Can I say one thing to wind it
Yes.
down? In North Carolina, no domestic violence law applies to same-sex couples. It's
Oh, that's right.
that we need to
Right.
take care of.
Right.
Yes, we do.
Thanks, Roberta.
Thank you. Okay, ladies, thank you. Have a wonderful night, a wonderful day. It's lunchtime.
It is indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. All right. So it is.